Hey, all. I just stepped out of the shower, so let me put my shirt on. Hey,
Ooh,
baby.
it's a baby. There's a ghost of Heiner in it.
Heiner's trapped in the Dewey Decimal System.
Yeah, old-fashioned library.
Card catalogs.
I can even do without.
Better. Now we can actually see you. That green screen is the wrong color.
Well, it's my, how do you say, bedsheet screen, but I can move to green screen if you need.
No, it's okay. I'd rather see the real you than a ghost.
But I need the scaffolding of the libraries.
No. The screen behind you is the same color as the sweater you're wearing, so everything
Yes,
goes like.
yes, I know.
Oh, here's Jean Paul today.
Yep. So unlike most days where I'm pretty casual about what we talk about, I actually am very interested in one particular topic today, and I'll introduce that after check-ins.
Well, I'll go first before the baby takes away my attention. I just came on to check on Barry and see how he's doing in the winter storm and just say hi to everybody. And this morning was the first morning that the baby actually crawled. Like she's been trying, but then she went up the bed and she's, it's the first day she's actually like can crawl. So it's pretty awesome. Yep. So good to see you guys.
Has it been?
Looking forward. Yeah, it's how old are you now? She said 7.5 months.
Oh, she talks.
They have an understanding.
Here, ready? This is what she's doing right now. She's using her iPhone.
Oh,
She wants to say hi. You want to say hi to everybody? Okay, here. Go ahead, say hi.
Hey,
Hi.
now what's her name again?
Her name's Ayana.
Hi, Diana.
Ayana, we're having these conversations for you.
Well, she's the youngest on GCC, right?
she's moving right along there.
Yep. Yep.
Well, won't be long, and she'll be playing the guitar behind her.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's been playing. She loves the drums, actually. It's so strange. She's really, every time she goes by the drum, she's like, give me that drum.
All right.
Yep. I'm gonna.
It's almost like a swimming motion, which I think is how they start out, kind of imitating a swimming motion.
Turns out when the arms are
Look at that.
strong,
Oh,
they actually start by going backwards.
Yeah, she was going backwards for a while. Exactly. What'd you say? A
Hi,
bit?
Ayana.
You said hi?
very nice.
Yeah. She's been on these calls all year, so she knows you guys.
At this age, we tend to say they are kind of edible because of so sweet. When they grow up, you regret you haven't eaten them.
Yeah, wait till she's a teenager.
That's
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. Oh, especially girls.
Bless you.
Stacy knows all about that.
Bless you.
You're still muted, Stacy.
It sounded like she repeated, "You're muted."
Yeah. Well, she wants to participate. It looks like that.
Yeah. What do I
Just-
know all about? I came on late. I couldn't hear.
Well, I came on just like Josh to check and make sure Barry and Stacy still had power.
I have power, but a lot of snow.
How much where you are?
Enough that the dog was covered and wanted to come back in. I haven't measured.
They said it's approximately at least a foot in most places. That's what I just heard.
Sounds
So
about right.
that's,
If you're
that's how,
closer, if you're closer to the coastline, you get more. I'm about 20 miles inland in Metro Boston Northwest. I think we're at maybe around 4 inches. It's hard to say because the snow is very fine, very light, and blowing. It stays aloft for a long time. When it falls down, it depends on where in the wind pattern it is. So looking right outside my window, which is right outside the building, you know,
Mhm.
it's misleading because it blows off the roof.
So you get the snowdrift building up against your walls.
Yeah. I mean, if I look, there's a stoop in front of my French doors, and right at the front door, it's like this. And then at the edge of the stoop, it's like another 3 inches higher. So it's actually a pretty slope, just, you know, just about a foot and a half the length of the front stoop on the French doors.
Right. But what's the sentiment locally? Because internationally, it was drawn like a panic stage in Boston.
Well, it depends on who you ask. I mean, they've been sort of throttling back the predictions gradually. And
Okay.
I think that where I live, I will get maybe a bit more than a foot, and maybe down by the coast where it's, well, see, the eye of the storm is just off the Atlantic coast.
Mhm.
So as you come in, the coastline gets hit the hardest. And as you come in 10, 20, 30 miles inland, it tapers off. So the coast may get 2 feet or more in spots because it also comes around in bands. These bomb cyclones come around in bands. So if you're in a heavy band, you get more. If you're 10 miles either side of the heavy band, you're going to be in a low of the
Okay.
band. And so if I get a foot, and remember, this is very light snow, so it's going to pack down as it sits.
Hmm.
So when I say a foot, that sounds like a lot, but that's a normal snow, not a very light, fluffy snow.
But snowy and stormy.
Well, I mean, even though it's windy enough that the stuff is blowing around like crazy, but I don't actually hear the wind. It's not howling.
Hmm.
But it's blowing sideways because the flakes are so tiny and light. And they just sort of sit there swirling around for half a minute before they finally find their way to the ground.
Right.
I mean, it's literally blowing sideways right outside my window.
Well, you have enough food and everything in the home so that you can.
Oh yeah,
resist.
I mean, if I don't mind the lack of variety, I could probably survive for a month before I would really run out of staple food.
Mhm.
Maybe longer.
All right, you'll survive.
Yeah, I mean, I could survive on. When I was a kid, I grew up on peanut butter and toast. You know.
Okay.
So Sam,
Anybody
you
else
have a
wanna go?
topic.
I'll go next. I'll just do a quick check-in. Had a very intense week. No matter what I do, it turns out all the big things happen on a single day. Turns out I've been working on a project for months, and we had to go through a final go live decision gate on Wednesday. So everything's been very intense going up to that. So we've had to go through a number of intense reviews, and we actually went live at about 3 a.m. on Thursday morning. But on the very same day, on Wednesday, I had a webinar to give. So I had a lot of preparation for a webinar that had about 156 people registered for it as well. So everything happens on Wednesday. So yesterday I just had to take a chill day, and had another intense day yesterday. So I'm really looking forward to the weekend, starting last night when I fell asleep like around 8 o'clock in the evening. So it's a pretty intense day, week for me. But I'm having brunch with my daughter today at 12:30. So I'm looking forward to that. So I'll be leaving here as soon as we end. That's my check-in. And just another teaser, I have a very specific question for us to talk about today, if we choose to do so. Any other check-ins?
Any other check-ins?
Any
It's
other?
been a busy week. It's been a busy week here too. Everybody seems to have budget again. It's January, so everybody calling in and trying to establish all kind of links. We are out of a lockdown now in the Netherlands, so people are capable of traveling again. We've received 2 groups of teachers from Turkey now here, and we're busy with them. I'm seeing them tomorrow again, so which is very nice to be able to cross connect again and to be able to further, well, somehow inspire people. And also there have been contacts online with other cities who want to do things in terms of air quality and mobility transformations and those kind of things. And they want to see how we do it here and see if we can get subsidies out of Europe to work together. I'm also working on a worldwide training course for food resilience. There's a lot of people there, and also transforming cities into more food productivities and those kind of things, and also the entire landscape going into much more resilience with food, which is very interesting because we do that with videos. And so I'm looking at partners to see if we can make some nice videos to make a lively course for the people. Anyway, that's the type of things. And then obviously the involvement of young people, trying to get as many young people involved as possible, which is very nice.
Did you get a message from my friend Roseanne Asiambre? She was trying to tune into your session, but she didn't know it was an hour later on Tuesday, so she missed it. But I told her, I gave her your credentials, how to reach you on Facebook and email. So look for Roseanne Asiambre.
Yeah, she sent an email and said that she got confused about the time, which is quite natural, because it's quite difficult anyway. But that's about the peace session, and indeed, that's an interesting one because I'm also engaged with this community which is called Visioneers in Canada, and your friend Heiner with Desmond, and these people, they have a group now of something like 300-400 people who all are active in the world doing things, whether in activism or in changing the world or doing some good things. And but what they were trying to do is establish a kind of a library to show the people everything that is happening in the world. But when there was a meeting last week, all those people who are active in this field, they stood up and said, well, this is beautiful that you want to do a library, but there's so many people who are active. We would like to connect between these people and see if we can also integrate those activities and become much more dynamic in the group rather than static. And they didn't know really how to do that. So I made a proposition to them to see if we can do something with a group of 300 people there. And they accepted fearfully because they lose a lot of our control, of course. But now we're starting up a dialogue now to see if we can get all those worldwide beautiful people to define clusters together to see if we can do things. And that is also very much related to the peace event that I organized. And I'm organizing now every month up to the Pure Music event in Nigeria in July with payment. And every month we have this peace. And every time we take topics in peace, and peace is also one of the things that the Visioneers are busy with. Anyway, so it would be nice if we could somehow also do something here together to see if we can find a common topic that we can further elaborate and see if we can make a difference in the world.
Thank you, Jean-Paul.
Since you
Okay.
guys are here, I just have a question. Does anybody here know anything more about Project Drawdown or know anybody that's active there?
Never heard of it.
No. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, I have some contacts and they're doing really great stuff. And there was recently some good news. I'm not going to repeat here, but we
Okay.
can stay in touch.
Yeah.
I'm longing for snow. Bring some over.
You can have all of mine or 99% of it.
It's much too warm here and we don't even have rain. So we are needing water, bring some over in any kind of form. I was 2 days ago with our annual Memorial Day for the Holocaust, very busy. We could not make the typical demonstrations. So we have this tunnel at the track 17 where all this deportation took place. And then we had a shield on our back and we were reading, walking in line like goose in the tunnel, and everybody reading his book in isolation. Another way to overcome this silly demonstration laws in Germany. Everything else like busy and normal, over.
What's the temperature there? About 15, 16, 17?
No, we only have a degree Celsius, and
That's what I meant.
it's above 0, and then it's about 3, 5, 7 degrees Celsius.
It's 12 here, by the way, 12 degrees. I just looked it up.
Centigrade,
16
all right.
outside my front door.
No, Fahrenheit.
Right.
So it's
Well,
below
Fahrenheit.
0.
Oh,
I meant.
okay. Yeah, I'm in the same climate zone as Heine, so we don't have too much of a difference.
So I have a topic
Okay,
that I
what's the
thought I'd
question?
bring, and it's actually very close to Jean-Paul's expressed interest with the Visioneers, but with a particular focus, okay? So let me give you like 45 to 60 seconds on this. There's a number of presumptions that we want peace in the world, okay? So forget the debate, let's just assume we want peace, okay? And if not, we can go back and have that debate about peace some other time. If we want peace, my claim has always been that coexistence is a necessary component of peace, that we have to learn how to coexist. And what does coexistence really mean? We've used that word a lot, but we haven't really defined it. To me, there's 3 elements that I really like to put on the table as far as what coexistence means, okay? One is the obvious one, no violence, okay? Another one is tolerance. In other words, being able to just put up with people despite differences. The other is engagement. In other words, separation to me doesn't necessarily mean a good way of coexisting. It's better than violence, but there, ideally would be some engagement so that we actually are one rather than many. Well, if I go below that level again, then to me, the important areas again fall out into 3 components. One is, and I think that's the one that we've really identified here as disagreeing well. Rather than walking away, rather than mockery, rather than violence, we have to learn how to disagree well. But that also requires that we understand how to make sense of things together. So to me, another element of this is good sense making. And then the other necessary component down at this base level is mutual respect. That's the hard one for me. Because when I look at idiocy and stupidity, I quickly lose respect. That's a hard one, okay? So here's my diagram in a mental way, okay? There's peace, then there's coexistence at the next level, and then there's the 3 elements of no violence, tolerance, and engagement. And then below that is good sense making, mutual respect, and disagreeing well. The areas that I think are fairly well understood by most are respect and tolerance and no violence and peace. But I think the pieces that I think we've teased out more and I haven't heard discussed in most other forums and communities are the disagreeing well and the coexistence pieces. So that's a mental model I've been thinking about, and I just want to put that on the table because this disagreeing well is why I'm here. Okay. There's plenty of people that say, oh, well, you're different than me. You're stupid. I'm going to walk away. I'm not going to talk to you. That's a form of coexistence. I'm wondering whether we can actually level that up. That's my intro. Over.
There's an interesting aspect of respect and disrespect that's literally from the word spect, which means to look at. And you may have seen that send up of Angela Merkel rolling her eyes, which is a sign of not respecting the other person's position. And you don't even say a word. And the notion of looking askance, rolling your eyes, goes all the way back to Genesis. There's an episode in Genesis where the two brothers, the farmer and the herder, bring their offerings to the to present at the annual fair, and one of them, looks on. The judge looks on with respect. Everybody, the judge looks askance, and that brother gets really upset. He's embarrassed, and he rises up in violence against the blue ribbon winner. So this is a really, really old trope in the literature, and so just rolling your eyes is already literally disrespect, not looking, keenly at your dialogue partner.
Thank you, Barry.
Yeah, try to think first how to bring the things, because you're bringing up the situation between people. There's also a situation between us people and our natural environment, which is also something which is necessary there. So yes, bringing up respect is a complex thing if you are in a competitive environment, and so we have to leave that competitive environment and become much more open towards each other into an integrated way, which means that we have to transform our type of listening. We have to our communication abilities, our education, our way of establishing our institutions, and just about everything. So it is quite a challenging thing, and I see it as an evolution that we are leaving behind our tradition of competition, and we are growing into a way of more compassionate and much more understanding among each other, and more diplomacy also with each other. So peace is a very, it's kind of orchestrating things that like music, like making music sound good, means that there has to be a way of listening to each other in a positive way and a coherent way, and then getting the balance between all these things. And I think it requires a little bit of talent, but also openness and losing the fear for the other.
May I jump in?
Please do.
I think there have been only 2-3 scenes where Angela Merkel was rolling her eyes and was just saying, oh no, oh no. You see, for her, in my view, it is her last line of defense. Normally she's making this and being calm and not showing this open gesture like rolling her eyes. The key situation when she did it, when she was berated by her Minister of Interior, who was the head of Bavaria, who's been putting her like a little girl beside her, berating her and keeping her on stage for 10-15 minutes, telling something which is really incredible. Everybody else would have made a big fuss and moving out of the event. That is the other thing. What is more respect? I think it is more respect on her side to stay with him and not creating a big blow or a big fuss, but showing to her people, oh, this is another universe. I'm alien here. And this is the oddest guy you could ever encounter. I mean, far from the Black Forest or wherever. So I would really say she showed respect, but there should be limits.
And the other instance,
Well, it's been not such a prominent one, where I don't even think it was in television.
wouldn't there
when
be
she
one
was-
with DJT, the former
Yeah.
one?
Yes, there was.
Yeah,
Yes. I remember her reacting like that with the former idiot.
Which, Mr. Trump?
Yeah.
Well, maybe there too, but it was not so obvious. And she sure had encounters with the Russian counterpart. It is difficult on such a scene to always being confronted by the cameras. So normally I only remember when she was off camera, and it was more like a family environment. So she could afford to really show her emotions. And showing emotions is not bad. I like it very much.
So in fact, that's close to a second topic that I had a possibility of putting on the table, which is the amassing of troops by Russia on the Ukrainian border. I was really curious because we're very close there to seeing another international incident. And international incidents get created by very small local incidents, as we all learn. So I'm curious to see, whether or not we think something's going to happen, because too often we here in the US think, oh, that's just over there. That doesn't affect us. I don't think anything could be further from the truth these days.
My great grandparents came to the US from Kiev.
Are you then by lineage Ukrainian?
Well, probably, I mean, not because, all my Jewish ancestors were in the diaspora, and Eastern Europe was a big part of the diaspora. Other grandparents came from Germany, so they were all over Europe. But the saber rattling, I mean, not just sending troops, you send medical supplies as if he needs them, is saber rattling. And the question is, is it the bluster, or is it, is he really planning to use those troops and all those military medical supplies that he sent there?
Well, Josh's hand is up, but just a quick response. Just hearing about what Russia is doing, it's not just amassing troops, it's actually taking out infrastructures by cyber warfare.
Yes.
They're already doing
Yes.
that quite a bit.
Yes.
So they're certainly serious about destabilizing the Ukraine.
Yes.
Josh?
It was a good moment a second ago, but let's see, because I just have a tweet from the NSC secretary in Ukraine that Danovo tells the BBC he doesn't expect an imminent invasion and doesn't share the panic, which he connects to geopolitical and domestic process in the West. The buildup in Russian troops at the Ukrainian border isn't as rapid as some claim. That's January 24th, posted by Gregory Atislan from the Ukraine NSC secretary, Danovo.
24th is almost a week ago.
Yeah, but
So it's funny,
messaging is all
Yeah, it's
part of-
interesting that they didn't ask Ukraine what they thought, but that the Democratic Congress decided to put $500 million to go for war. And I'm sure it has nothing to do with getting money for the industrial military complex, or the fact that the Republicans and the Democrats are bipartisanly working on it because they want to offer 450 million, not 500 million. So I'm sure it has nothing to do with escalating tensions that don't need to be escalated, but we'll see how it plays out. I just wanted to, that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
I'm glad you said that, Josh, because, I've been watching, I haven't been watching a lot of news, but when I do, I watch Al Jazeera. And it's a whole different tone than what I'm like seeing on social media, which I don't even engage in, because I think that's the whole purpose of creating something that may not be there.
There's an NPR journalist in Kiev, and she's been interviewing people in Kiev, people on the street and officials live on NPR since the last few days. They don't seem that panicked.
So that was the other thing I wanted to put on the table. Because when you get that much potential and that much show of force, it only takes a small excuse to make a move. And I think these excuses also can be manufactured.
Yep.
Anyway, back to this whole peace notion. I do, as I say, note that many forums talk about nonviolence. Many forums talk about they don't really talk about how to deal with disagreement. That's the unfortunate thing. They don't actually encourage the active practices. They're only suppressing the negative practices, which in life and coaching, we all know runs counter. And it's basically not a great way to teach. So I'm still looking for ways that we can approach this that are constructive. In other words, they create a solution as opposed to just tests for failure, like violence.
Well, that I find
Go ahead.
that I find also in the visionaries is always about three streams of people. Well, certain people who want to repair the world, and so they are very reactive, and they see all the damages being done and everything, and they try to mop with the tap open. And there are people who want to change the world, right? And they are activists and those kind of things. And then there are people like myself who are building something new. And we're building something and we're inviting the people to something new. And from a peace perspective, if I have everybody working on Healthy City, nobody is thinking about war or anything. We are looking at a very positive way of engaging with each other because we have a common objective. And that is what I try to do in Africa, which with people who are dealing with water and with people in poverty and those kind of things, try to give them feed them and make sure that these people are not starving of hunger, and that they can then, once they have their stomach filled, can start thinking about all the other constructive things. So building on things rather than trying to solve problems which are being caused by somebody else. And I would like to see, that is my perspective, right? And I don't want to talk about what are they doing, because what they are doing, all right, fair enough. Let everybody do what they want to do, and everything, putting plasters on a leg is probably just as efficient as trying to create an environment where we don't need those plasters anymore. But anyway, it's I would like to see, if you want to be constructive, then I would like to see what would you do? What would you do, and where can we do maybe the things together?
Benjamin Franklin famously said to his fellow patriots, "Gentlemen, we can disagree without being disagreeable." Mm-hmm. And I think that what he really was talking about is we can be diplomatic and tactful. But you know, in my STEM education, I never took a course in tact or diplomacy. And so I don't have any skills in tact or diplomacy. And it's a big deficit in my education.
It's a deep concern for me. It is not only diplomacy, but multi-track diplomacy. Some of you shared in other groups this Carl Sagan work. He really left his profession, being into astronomy and interstellar or whatever, and doing peace talks in the late 80s between the Russians and the Americans, how to come to a common language. And through this Julia, some of you met already with her school peace gardens, where we really look into how to work on coming to common terms, to common understanding, to common doing and dancing. And actually the last 3 days, I had this discussions with about the Ukraine. How can we do such school peace gardens along the boundaries or the walls between Weißrussland, which is the country north of Ukraine? How is it in English? What is the country north of Ukraine?
Which one?
Is
I
it
have to look
Georgia?
on the map. I don't
What
know.
is it? What is it in German?
Weißrussland.
Oh,
Belarus.
White Russia. White Russia.
It's Belarus. How
Belarus.
around do
Alright.
something around Belarus and
Mhm.
Russia to really have a peace garden or peace corridor, that not the weapons and some crazy military who by accident trigger something which is building up, because that is a danger. If they all have guns, somebody is shooting because he lost his mind or by accident. So anyway, all these issues are very much on my table the last weeks.
But can you do something about it?
We discussed with Julia what we want to do about this.
Mhm.
And it's very, very difficult because we have all this peace unions with Einstein's non-proliferation and whatever issues. It is also segregated. Everybody is doing his things and nobody getting its acts and the tools together. That is what I just discussed with Jean-Paul. We need also structure and not just harmony.
Yeah, but what do we want to do about Ukraine?
Oh, didn't come up. Whatever Sam was trying to pull up didn't come up.
Yeah, you're trying to share something.
Really? It didn't?
We just
Nope.
saw black. Whatever you're trying to show is just black.
Yeah, you're still trying to share something there, Sam?
I was just noting that I
There
was
it is.
horribly
There it is.
off
Oh, okay.
on
The
my
map.
It looks like
geography.
Sam
Georgia is
wants to
south.
share, but
Mhm.
Yeah,
in
Belarus.
reality,
Belarus.
it is Jean-Paul showing us where Belarus is and how close it is to Germany.
And Poland and Lithuania. Yeah, I
And
have
I-
other ancestors from Lithuania.
But how big Ukraine is, right? It's an incredible country.
I was off. Georgia is actually to the south of Ukraine.
Ukraine is really far south, isn't it? It's already down by the Black Sea.
Looking across to Turkey.
Maybe show another map that we see the boundaries.
We see the boundaries here.
Not really.
Well,
They're
they're in
thin.
yellow, I think.
They're thin, yeah.
Yeah, they're in yellow. Hard to see yellow.
Yeah. Maybe I can do a little further. zoom.
Yellow are the streets.
Those are the streets? No. Oh, really?
Those are the streets, yeah. Those are the
Okay.
streets.
Yeah.
The little gray things are
Oh,
the, that's
gray. I can't even see the gray.
The border is right here. This is the border right here.
Yes.
Oh, very
Let's
thin
look
gray.
at a political map.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
no, but gives an idea. It's a huge country. I don't think anyone's going to be fighting there. I think they're just barking dogs. I'm just making a point towards NATO and things. That's it.
So,
Yeah.
Jean-Paul, I will answer your question. You are interested in what we each are doing, right? Rather than, pointing fingers. I still think my focus is on improving our sense-making ability by focusing on how we exchange perspectives, understandings, knowledge, models. And that is the DKR. That is the dynamic knowledge repository, on top of which then we can have intelligent conversation. If we don't have that, then we just have, oh, you're wrong, finger pointing, you know, without
That's right.
understanding where these claims and positions come from. And I think if we have a common model, way of thinking, a way of interacting, then we can learn what disagreement and disagreeing well could look like. Because we could then say, okay, we agree on this piece, we just don't agree on that piece. But if we don't agree on anything, it's hard to have a conversation.
Yeah.
So if we don't have the agreement, for example, about how elections are held, okay, or how fake electors are presented to the election committees, you know, if we don't have a common basis for assessing factual information, raw information, then any claim made loudly enough and repeatedly enough gets traction. And that's dangerous. We've got a situation right now where people very, very well know how to use this propaganda technique. And we have to counter that. So my focus is on how do we do sense making well in order so that we can actually learn how to do the disagreement well. That is where I am focused right now. Over.
All right, that's nice, but do you have a particular suggestion?
Yes. Those of us who actually believe in things and make statements, I think the very first practice I would actually propose is to ground our statements. You'll note that for over 10 years, maybe a dozen years, however long I've been on Facebook, okay, I don't just forward memes, for example. I always forward with attribution. I always thank someone, the source from which I get something. And if I'm asking a question, I'm also saying, okay, this is what I've heard. Where's my source? Where's my foundation for what it is that I'm thinking about? I have big problems with people who cannot provide such traceability, such provenance. And I think as a personal practice, that'll be the first thing that I would venture to propose as a recommendation. You know, really ground your statements, cite your sources, and be open to other sources and to what they say. This is not technology. This is nothing fancy. This is personal practice. And that change can happen with personal practice. Over.
I can think of 3 responses, none of which really are as good as I want them to be. One of them is basically what Sam said. What's your evidence? Just say, what's your evidence? The other one is, this comes from the New Testament. That's what you say. And the modern version of that is, how did you falsify the null hypothesis? I don't like any of those. They don't seem to work as well in practice as they do in theory. But maybe, you know, what's your evidence might be the sort of the middle of those 3.
I think we hear that question being asked often enough, then those claims that are unsubstantiated can go away, or at least can be, you know, not given as much attention or as much energy, as much airtime. Right now, there's this, I think, a very bad practice in quote unquote news reporting, which is you always have to present the other side. I say, no, you don't. If the other side has no basis, then why present it? You know,
Or presented as a parody, which is pretty commonplace today.
So I think there's a very fundamental error in journalism to actually say that is fairness. That is not fairness. That's not fair to the truth. I do grant, however, it's a fine line, how you assess opinion and truth. And right now, we don't have journalists that are well trained in doing so because we let all kinds of shit, you know, go by without questioning it. Yeah, Heiner, you had your hand up.
I don't know if I should speak up. I'm getting very angry and disgruntled. So you see, we do in Nicosia, this Greek-Turkish dialogues, some dialogues went over months and years, how to come to the same stories, to the same symbols and narratives. And it's really a process. And knowing how difficult it is, and that we need shared maps and shared models, and also walking from one territory to the next. So it's really a really hard process. And with some people, I'm involved in that since 30 years. So I see, especially in our group, that we can not come even after Sam, I know you know since 6 years, Barry,
4 years.
maybe 4 years, it doesn't
in
matter.
GCC.
Some years, not really coming to what I mean to maps and models. We talk, but when I show how we do it in what I call a cognitive panorama, nobody is ever picking it up. Nobody is ever asking a question. And I really tried it in kindergartens and really making conferences on what is transdisciplinary, and taking the garden fence away and going to the neighbors or enemies' sandbox. All this is taken just for words. And I'm really getting emotional now. I wonder how we can talk to each other and really coming to ends. So I close the session now, and I hope we meet again next week.
And he's gone.
Sadness and disappointment. And actually, you know, that's what happens to anger. It turns into depression.
And it takes into departure.
Right. Yeah. You know, sort of giving up hope.
Now we
Just-
have a loss of engagement with Heiner.
Yeah. But I can empathize with them because, I mean, I love maps and models, but I also realize that very few people can digest a presentation of maps and models without their eyes glazing over or just being bewildered. I can get farther with satire and parody, but satire and parody is a little bit edgy by definition. So, you know, the thing is that nothing works as well as you'd like, in the sense that it's not terribly effective. No matter what you try, it's not terribly effective. Which is why this issue persists for millennia, since the dawn of written history.
So I'll tell you what personally I am trying, okay? So in 2009 was when I first started this evolution of 6 or 7 projects that I have given various different names, okay? Among them, Global Sim. And I quickly came to the conclusion that if you do a lot of thinking, and if you try to pass on a lot of results of a lot of thinking, people's eyes glaze over, like you said, because they're not part of the derivation of that model.
Right.
Because it's too much to understand in one step.
Exactly.
So I have stepped back and said, okay, can we mutually co-create that model? And in 4 years, there have been very small steps. There's been general acquiescence about coexistence, general acquiescence about disagreeing well, general acquiescence about good sense making, about co-visioning. Those, I think, are beginning to emerge. So where some people express frustration with how long it's taken and say there's nothing to show for it, I'm actually more nuanced than that. I actually see that there is progress, and that this perspective, oh, nothing is happening, is not a constructive one. It doesn't actually add to our co-construction. So I prefer to focus on where we are seeing some growth, some direction, some movement. And I am not deluding myself to say we as a group will ever get to a single project. That's not any longer my objective here, okay? Because we're a random group. We're not, you know, instituting qualifications or certifications for participation. We're not, installing minimum standards for what people say. We are basically here trying to listen to everyone. So this is, as I say, a town square. And I think, if I want to do something, I'll gather 1 or 2 or 3, and I'll go into my kitchen or my garage and I'll do something more substantial there. But in the town square, where anybody can come and go, that's a place that's not conducive, in my mind, for creating a single great project that we can all align to and give our energies to. So I think that's a misexpectation in my mind.
The brightest thing happening here is something that takes me back to Socrates. When Socrates went out to the agora, to the town square, he didn't talk to the adults, he talked to the children. And Kayla, bless her heart, has brought a child in for us to talk to. And that's the one frontier that I think is a bright spot, being able to communicate with young people who are just beginning to develop their thinking capability. And I can make my own experience, I can make a lot more progress with young people than I can with adults, with my peers. And that's what we're missing here in GCC. We're all, well into our adult years.
I'm still waiting for puberty myself, though.
I'm sorry, say that again. I didn't catch it.
I'm still waiting for puberty myself. Anyway, look, I agree with you. That's why I tried this teen Congress thing, and I've reached out to various teens. I think Kayla is actually smarter than I am, because she knows that it's harder to reach teens than it is to reach preteens. And I should know this because I used to teach music to 10 and 12-year-olds, okay? And that was a great experience. I did that for over a decade. They were very respectful. They're very engaging. They're very quick to pick up on what you're trying to teach them. Once they hit 13, once they discover the other gender, the other sex, once they discover, things about how to pose, it's much harder. So I like the 10, 11, 12-year-olds much more than I like the over 13 crowd, as far as teaching and interacting with, okay?
Yeah.
There's other values in teens, okay? It's great, it's necessary. But I do agree with you on that one.
Stacy raised her hand.
Stace.
Yeah, so we started talking about eye rolling earlier in the call. And, Heiner felt he had to defend Angela Merkel, but the point is, I'm sure she didn't start out interacting with them with an eye roll. It took a while of getting to know the person and getting to see how he behaved. What I was going to say is, Sam, you were asking about the proactive part. And I was going to say what's really missing is humility. And humility takes a certain amount of awareness. And if I were to say to you, I'm going to introduce you to my friend, she's going to come. And she claims that since she was a child, she's been contacted by aliens. Many of you would roll your eyes.
I'd be asking questions.
Excuse me?
I'd be asking questions. I'd love to hear the story.
I'd be raising my eyebrows.
Okay, but my point is, there'd be something inside of you that retracts, and this can't be.
Bring her in.
No, I'm just making this up.
I know, of course, I'm joking. Don't worry about it.
But my point is, because I'm trying to, this lack of humility comes out in a lot of ways, and I see it all the time when we refer to them, how stupid they are, and those people.
Right.
And one of the reasons that we have success with children, like Barry mentions, is because that's when we're on our guard to not do anything that's going to appear to be putting them down or mocking them.
Yeah,
and that's on us. So it's not them that's making it easier. It's us holding ourselves to higher, more humble standards and really trying to hear where their questions are coming from or where their ideas are coming from. I'll stop there. Sam, go ahead.
I'm going to gently and respectfully disagree with you. I think there is a limit to tolerance. And there is a limit to the lack of thinking that I choose to engage with, okay? And I'll give you, I forget who this comes from, but there's someone who says it's easier to engage with someone who's completely open than with somebody who really knows what's true, right? I forget exactly who said it and exactly how it's being expressed. In other words, if your thinking is calcified and you're sure that you're right, then no amount of reason, no amount of interaction, no amount of evidence will ever get through. That's a waste of time. That's the tiger and the donkey story I told last week. Okay, and then I do think that if you actually give an attempt and you see that there's a lack of reasonability in the other, then you can give that a name. It's a pattern of behavior. Give it a name. Some people call it stupidity. Some people call it idiocy. Some people call it closed-mindedness. You can describe it. And I can choose not to engage with that, because engagement with that is a waste of time. It gives them more power, gives them more influence, and that's not good for society. So I do have standards for how open I choose to be, but they will stop at some point. And I think we as a society can make that a discernment as well. We should not give too much time to idiocy, to stupidity, to closed-mindedness, to unbased belief. Now,
So
I'm
flip
open
that
to being guided differently. I truly am. But right now, that is my position, because it's a dangerous opening for that influence to take down society. Over.
Jean-Paul?
Yeah. When I hear words like stupidity and all these kind of things, they're all judgments, of course, and that's putting yourself in the energy of somebody else.
Yes.
Rather than, I would like to very much more engage with the energy of yours in a positive sense. So if I look at a theme like, for instance, peace, then we all have our circumstances here at home or in our place, or we can make it a very broad thing, like in our cities or in our country, dealing with peace. But sticking to family life, I myself live with in 3 certain generations. I'm in the middle. My mother is, I'm taking care of my 86-year-old mother, and then my daughter is living with us. At the same time, she's 21 years old. And we are 3 different generations growing up in totally different type of mindsets. And keeping that into a peaceful type of a situation is sometimes a challenge on its own. My mother is very much religious. It's grown up in a terrible type of environment of right and wrong. My daughter is very much more in the liberal type of with her traumas of growing up without a mother. Like things like that, they're kind of conflictive in its own, and trying to get to a common understanding is sometimes a challenge of its own. But that is my circumstances. I'm living my circumstances. How do I deal with that is one particular way. That could be of inspiration to somebody else or not. I don't mind, and I don't care really, because that's the way I deal with it. But what I do care is that, how are you dealing with these kind of things, Sam? How are you dealing with these kind of things in a very nitty-gritty little thing? Where there will be a cultural difference maybe between you and me. You may have a different insights. I'm not going to disagree with you. I'm not going to say this is stupid or this is whatever, because it's your way of dealing with these kind of things. And I'm sure that I can find certain points of inspiration for myself and say, hey, wait, that's interesting. Or, hey, wait, that's interesting because in Seattle it's working like that, and in Boston it's working like that. Or these are the circumstances. And we can share these kind of things so that we can just build on this solid foundation of the authenticity that I recognize in you, Sam, and I recognize that in Barry. I recognize that in all the people here in this platform. They all have something to bring to this forum, okay? And that is the type of gathering that I would like to have, because it's an enrichment to myself, okay? And that is the type of atmosphere that I like. And I also am very pleased to see Thijs here, because now I know that we are not with a lockdown, And I see that he had a haircut, so the hairdressers are open again. This is absolutely beautiful. All right, you see what I mean, Sam? It says
Absolutely. And I'm not
let's
disagreeing
try
with
to
that.
connect on those things that we have together.
Yeah. I think there is a behavior that I'm calling out. And I know this is controversial. I know this is non-politically correct, but I think it needs to be called out. It is often viewed as negative. It is not negative. It is well-intentioned to say identifying this behavior is good for society. Just like identifying intolerance is good for society. We should not tolerate intolerance. We should not tolerate a closed-mindedness that is so certain of its righteousness and has influence. That is negative for society. So it is truly for, and I am open, as I say, to revising my outlook. But at the moment, I'm just seeing too much influence, too much power, too much resource taking, too much wastage caused by fallacious thinking and very bad perspectives. And I think that needs to be recognized. If it's not recognized, it has immense power to destroy. And I would love for us to survive at least another 5, 7 plus generations. But those influences are not good for these future generations. Over. Stacy?
Very, very quickly, my very strong belief is that if we approached people with questions early on, the fallacious thinking wouldn't take off. But instead of answering them and having a respectful discourse, we shut them down. That's crazy. That you could shake your head, but that is what happens. We've seen that happen with COVID, with the vaccines, with ivermectin, with all these things. There was never any true discussion of, well, why do you think this? Well, how did that happen? Well, where are the statistics? Instead, it was like, you're an idiot, you're an idiot. This is a conspiracy, you're this. And yeah, the more somebody is not going to feel heard, the more they're even going to go further. Go ahead, Sam.
So I believe those interactions and engagements did happen. I know that some of them did happen, but that's not what makes the news, okay? What makes the news is a bunch of other narratives that are being posed as, oh, well, you know, there's no evidence for this or whatever, okay? So when I get into conversations, and I've told you, I've been very open to having conversations with people on the other side of the aisle, quote unquote, okay? Number one, I give very few acceptances to have those conversations. The few that I do start with questions. And there are a few, I would say even most, that reach an impasse where my questions are no longer met with answers, not reasonable answers, not evidence-based answers, not well-reasoned answers. And this is a skill that I think we don't yet recognize. I'm saying it's a skill to understand where a line of reasoning actually stops being a line of reasoning. So this absolute openness towards the other side or the other opinion and say everything is valid, no, that is a dangerous position. It sounds to me like I'm being intolerant, but yes, I am intolerant of intolerance. I'm intolerant of this bad thinking, this irrational form of perspective taking, and worse, spreading it through being loud, through being influential. Now, yes, those are dangerous words. But I'm here saying I care enough about society and future societies that this is a real issue we need to take on. Over.
I really like Neil Gaiman's suggestion when things go awry. And his suggestion is, in a word, make good art. Now, the problem is I'm not very talented as an artist. It's not my long suit. And the art that I make is not necessarily any good. It may even be off-putting. So the notion is very powerful, make good art. But the problem is most of us are not very good at making good art. How do we learn to make good art so that we get our ideas, our message across in an inoffensive way that people actually do attend? don't get up and walk out of the theater. Stacy's got her hand
Yeah,
up.
Stacy's got her hand up.
Yeah, T's put in the chat a podcast with Zach Stein that I actually meant to put it up on my page. I highly recommend listening to it. But one of the things that he says, probably sort of in the middle, is if you think that your side is not being affected by propaganda, then that's part of the problem. So I recommend listening to that. I just wanted to say that.
I agree. I agree. While there's a lull, Barry, I encountered this one thing about good art, since you brought up good art, that I thought was really, really good. And it was, and I, again, forget who said it, but it said, good art should discomfort the comfortable and it should comfort the discomforted.
Yeah, it's an old Yiddish expression.
I like that one.
Yeah. Comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable.
Well, again, we are in the judgments here about who is to be judging the goodness of your art. If it comes to my mind when I try to speak French, for instance, and my French, well, it is kind of rusty, and I might be able to get by with it, but French people who are talking with me, they don't speak any Dutch. So my French at least is better than their Dutch, and I try. You know, and so I can judge that it's bad, but it's good enough to get by into a conversation. And the same thing happens with art. I may try my best to do art, and for the best of my abilities, I produce art. And I particularly am very enthusiastic about your writing. And Barry, for instance, is absolutely excellent. The way that you have expressed yourself into these blogs and everything, that's for me, that's art. And my judgment here, with all the limited perspectives that I can have, is that I get warm and enthusiastic about it. And for your feeling, it may not be perfect, and it could be much more or whatever. But for me, it is already much more than I could probably produce myself. So from a comparison point of view, I think that you take a lead in your art forms. And maybe you're not a very good painter. I don't know. Maybe you've never tried. Maybe you might not be good at poetry or something, but the art that you produce is excellent. Yeah. There again, you know, like we all try, and the judgment is not up to somebody else. I think the first judgment is up to you by trying.
Yeah. It's hard to get feedback though. If you put up a blog that's been up for a decade, you really don't know who looked at it or whether they enjoyed it. You have very little feedback. And in a live audience, you get the audience feedback real time. Writing on the internet, you don't get real-time feedback. So you have almost no information of who you're reaching and whether it's making any difference to them.
Well, maybe that is something that we have to do. Share a little bit more compliments to people when we are enthusiastic about something. Yeah, and one of the, I'm hesitant always to come to my core values, but I do work with them a lot, obviously, in my daily life. And the core value of safety is the essential part of a conversation. To feel safe, that you feel safe yourself, to not be attacked by the people, that you can express yourself freely and transparently, whether it's stupid or not by the presence of somebody else, but at least be able to be transparent in things and to share whatever type of information. And then the people can reflect about it, they can reflect back by it, but that safety, the sense of safety, being respected in terms of your authenticity, I think that's one of the basic things of peacefulness, also in our relationship. And the curiosity, then obviously to display curiosity. What do other people think about certain things, and listen to the person, not by creating an opinion, but seeing what can I do with the information that is being received. I think that is also one way of showing respect to another person.
Sam had his pinky up.
It was in relation to something that was being said that I forget the context for.
It was about getting feedback on whether your art is any good, and whether it's entertaining or offending people or changing their perspective or anything like that.
Yes. I find myself turning into an old curmudgeon, okay? because everything I'm going to say is going to be non-politically correct. I think avoiding judgment is self-delusion. We all are judging, always. The difference is, how do you behave when you do this judging? We all have, I guess the more politically correct term is discernment or discrimination. Actually, that's a bad word also. But people get triggered by this word judgment, just like they get triggered by this word stupid or get triggered by this word idiocy. These are just words. We all recognize that we make judgments in our own mind based on what we hear, based on what we see. The question is, what do we do with it? Do we recognize it and say, okay, fine, maybe I'm triggered here. This gives me information that I should then incorporate into my response. Now, some of my behavior, again, is quite politically incorrect. I will actually call something stupid. I will actually point out smart people problems. Because I think naming and recognizing is a way of dealing with. You can argue with whether it's correct or not. And then I will then, if I'm open, revise my definitions and my understanding and my perspective. But to see repeated patterns and naming them is a valid human activity.
Of course. And do you expect also that people ask questions to you and say, why do you find that stupid? What is your motivation?
Yes,
why?
That is the right response. That is, in my opinion, the right response. And I should be able to give you a good answer. And if I can't, then I'm stupid myself, okay? And I pose that as a ground practice. I should be able to explain myself. If we want to be adults in this society, that's the responsibility we need to take for what we say and what we believe. And if we cannot, then we should go back into our room and really start asking ourselves that question. Why can't I not explain this?
But you won't be able to get to adult, Sam, because you have not arrived at puberty yet.
That's correct.
You just said
It's a
that.
two-step process. It's a multi-step process.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's a funny story in my own career. I worked at a think tank called Bell Labs for the first 2 decades of my career. And one time, the director of the center called me in for a little feedback session, and you can tell because he closes the door before. And he looked at me very seriously. He says, "Barry," he says, "you make people think." And I looked at him and I go, "Jim, is that good or bad?" He didn't answer.
It's a good question.
I mean, it's a think tank, you would think that's a good thing, but I think he was prepared to, give me some negative feedback. And he starts off like, "Barry, you make people think. You're in the think tank. Is that good or bad?"
Well, in my
I'm sure.
experience in corporate culture, okay, you don't want certain bean counters to think too much. Okay, they start withdrawing funds.
Yeah. So, that's about, how do you know if the feedback is genuine and what to make of it? If he says, "Barry, don't make people think. This is a think tank. We don't do that here." Hello.
That's just marketing then. Okay. Stacy had her hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to what you said about judgment, because I agree, we all judge. But what I'm trying to say is that it takes a certain level of awareness and humility to go back and think about the way we judge first. And what I'm here to tell you is there are as many really smart people as there are what you might consider uneducated or not good critical thinkers that are equally as bad at understanding what helped form the way they judge. So it's not like, well, those people, they just don't know how to think. We're talking about smart people problems. There are a lot of smart people that don't understand their own internal workings. And that's the last time I'm going to say it. But that's all I have to say. That's what my focus is.
Okay.
And that
so if-
includes myself. and I'm constantly working on reevaluating where is my bias that maybe I didn't see.
Okay, so my question to you is it okay for me to ask the question? Why do you think that?
Yes, you can ask that question because I've observed it.
Mhm.
I've observed it in conversations and I handle it in conversations. I can give you two examples. Well, I'll give you one because it's not related to anybody we know. And it was just on a community page, somebody died. And one person who knew was asking, like, how did this happen? What happened? They were all upset. Another person jumped in like, you gossip monger, like this is terrible. And then a fight ensued. And she said, well, I'd rather be angry and respectful than a gossip monger. And that's when I finally jumped in and I said, well, respectfully, is it really better to be angry than gossipy? And then I said, you could have said the same thing in a nicer way. And it went over well. And why am I bringing this in? Oh, so, you know, and I also mentioned people handle death differently. So I'm using this example, probably not the best one, but you'll stretch a little bit because one person was thinking, you know, because they had their own emotional feelings about somebody's death being brought out into the open. You know, they had their own, it was their emotions. It made them lash out at someone else who was grieving and focus on the fact that they were gossiping. You know, I mean, probably not good. These were not, neither one of these people were dumb people. They, you know, we're all emotional people. And if we don't have a really good handle on how our emotional state affects us individually, it's going to happen. And I didn't want to use a different example, which might have been better because it would, you know, I don't want to use anybody's names and I don't want to do that.
So I'm having trouble seeing a stupid behavior pattern there.
It's not that it's a stupid behavior pattern. It's that it's coming from the vantage point of the other person just doesn't get it when there's a whole nother side to it.
But did
Or-
either side shut down and, you know, stay closed? That's not what I'm hearing.
No, well, they were both fighting with each other. They were,
But they were
you know,
still engaged. They were still asking questions of each other, right?
no, they weren't asking any questions. They were just telling the other person off.
So that's an interesting case because I think, you know, when both people are in grief, those of us that would have some tolerance for that would see that as people in grief.
Okay, now I remember why it came to my mind, because the interesting part of it was that one accused the other of looking to get attention for themselves. But that's exactly what that person who brought it up was doing.
Yeah.
So, and I see that all the time, people acting out exactly what they say they're against. And that's what I'm trying, and that's across the board.
Okay, so am I doing that right now?
Not right at this second, no.
Before, earlier?
I've seen you do it.
Yeah, call me out on it. I welcome it, actually.
So you're talking about hypocrisy then? Not practicing what you preach? Is that the issue?
But it's not because it's purposeful. It's just a lack of awareness that you're
Yeah.
even doing it. We all do it. I mean,
The
I
irony.
think that's the nature of being human.
Yeah,
The
that's why
the
calling
irony
it
of it.
out is helpful to me.
Yeah, but you don't, but pointing it out in front of a crowd, and I'm not just talking about with you, in general, pointing it out in front of a crowd is not the best way to go about that.
I'm saying it's okay for me personally.
Okay, well, I don't know that if I can, I will. But, you know, I also have my own boundaries of what's comfortable for me that I have to honor and respect.
And that goes for all of you, by the way, okay? Point it out to me when you see that I am not practicing what I'm saying.
Well, I kind of did. I mean, you know, I like the whole idea of when you were calling people stupid,
Mhm.
or, you know, that's like, you're pretty damn sure that they're
Yep.
stupid,
Yep.
or you're
I'll
pretty
own
damn
that.
sure.
I'll own that,
So I did.
okay? Yes, I recognize that moment. And I understand that's not a popular position to take, but I will own that. Because I think, there's downsides to not being that straightforward.
First, if you set a goal, which is a very high level goal, and nobody really knows how to reach it, it's sort of implicitly suggests that none of us are smart enough to know how to reach this goal, which we all would agree is a desirable, but none of us seem to make any progress or sufficient progress in reaching. That's almost an admission of inadequacy.
Don't we all start that way?
I'm sorry?
Don't we all start that way?
Oh,
We didn't know how to get to
sure.
the moon when
We all-
JFK said we were going to the moon. We didn't really know how to do that.
Yeah, we all struggle. We don't use the word struggle enough, I think. We're all struggling, and we rarely disclose what we're struggling against. And maybe we don't even know the name of what we're struggling against in a lot of cases. It's just, you can observe, for example, the infant, and you say, well, this infant is struggling how to crawl or how to locomote or whatever, how to talk, how to communicate. And a lot of times we can't disclose what we're struggling to do. It has to be intuited or inferred by a coach or observer or parent or critic or whoever.
Why can't you disclose?
Why can't we?
Why can't we disclose? You said many times we can't disclose.
Yeah,
Why can't you just show yourself vulnerable?
I think the problem in disclosing is having the language to express the vocabulary or some other way of communicating the name of what you're struggling against. It may be something that's so subliminal that you don't have the narrative to reveal it.
But that's only part of it.
That's part
I
of
mean,
it. Yeah,
that's
and then
the
there's the
big part.
intentional. There's putting on the mask to try to hide your deficit.
Which goes to why the need for the mask.
Right, to protect your ego, I suppose. That's one theory. Protect your reputation. If you come out and you say, I did something really stupid the other day, and not only is it stupid, it's probably criminal. Most people wouldn't be that candid. It's too dangerous to their well-being and their reputation going forward. They'd
I was
rather-
with a group of students, about 20 students, and I have a problem of engaging young people into the things that I'm doing. I'm trying that. So I told them, I said, I'm having trouble. I don't know how to do it. Help me.
Yeah.
Right. And they started helping me. And it was extremely extraordinary. It was mind-blowing. I loved it. But the only way I could get to that situation is putting myself absolutely down into the situation. Look, my helplessness is incredible. I just don't know how to do it.
Right.
Can I just add that one of the hardest things for a lot of people to do, especially smart people, is to ask for help. That's a really hard thing to do.
Yep.
Or to accept it, especially proud people.
Right.
So I will agree. Smart people do have a problem with that. Smarter people will do so. So there's a level of smartness that prevents you from asking for help. But then there's a level of smartness above that that says, the more I ask for help, the smarter I'm going to get, quote unquote. Smartness is important. Okay. So it's just a plateau that one must grow through, in my
And
opinion.
it's not all about smartness. A lot of people can't ask for help.
Say anything.
Yeah.
I went through a hell of a time when, after my second divorce, I didn't have a house, I didn't have anything. And if you imagine, I came from a high top management position with a high salary and everything, and I never had to ask anybody for help. And I was hesitant. I was kind of starving to death, but didn't want to ask anybody for help. And then people started helping me. And I was trying to reject it, but everybody knew I needed the help. And then somebody actually told me, says, John Paul, don't be so bloody stubborn. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for myself. I like to help you. And that was the time that I started accepting help. I was kind of, oh, wow, this is the other way around. It's not about me. It's about everybody else. People love to help people. They love it. It's for them. And I started becoming very humble there. And I filled my house. I got a house. I got just about everything because of the help of other people. And and the only thing they wanted from me They didn't even want my gratitude. And I was full of gratitude, but they were very satisfied by doing it themselves.
Yeah.
It's such an incredible lesson to be faced with the nothingness and receiving help from other people. I call that richness.
I had a funny situation in my youth. My brother's a year older than me, so he was always in the next grade level above me. And he struggled with subjects, mainly mathematics. And he would come to me for help with his math homework. And I would try to help him learn how to solve the problem. But he didn't want to learn how to solve the problem. He just wanted me to give him the answer. And so we had this conflict between, I don't want to know how to do it. I just want you to give me the answer, Barry. No, that's cheating. I wanted to help you learn how to solve it. I don't want that. So we had this funny conflict that here we are in our late 70s. We still remember this scene, here we are, decades later, we still remember this phenomenon of not the kind of help I want. Just give me the answer.
If I could just flip that around, that's another problem. A lot of people, they want to help, but they want to help in the way that they want to help you. That's not always helpful. So I think it's really important that you do what you really want to do, but also you only take what it has to be an even exchange.
Of course. Beautiful. Well, this is getting into a beautiful exercise, isn't it?
Yeah. How to help somebody in the optimal way that's mutually beneficial to both parties and obviously beneficial to both parties. And that's at least from my life, my experience, that's a problem that goes back to my youth with my own brother.
So I think, and I just want to say, I think the first step is to help the person identify what it is that they need and they want.
Yeah. They wanted the answer to get a passing grade without actually learning anything, which I'm not about to tell my brother.
And you have a right to not give that help.
Right. Exactly. And I refused to do it the way he wanted. So, there was an unsolved problem that goes all the way back. I'm a problem solver. It's a big unsolved problem that goes all the way back to when, we were in grammar school.
Did he join a fraternity?
Sorry?
Did he join a fraternity?
No, he did not join a fraternity.
I'm aware that certain fraternities help each other out in that very way that your brother likes.
Yeah. Now, I would be glad to mentor or tutor somebody, but to learn the subject where that wasn't taught well. And my best feedback is when I had a mentee and he said, only if the teacher explained it that way, I would have understood it. That's the kind of feedback I was looking for. And occasionally I would get that, but not with my own brother.
Sheila,
I want to get back. Sorry.
I was just remarking. I don't want to interrupt you.
I was going to get back to the Stacey's remark about getting into an agreement on what type of help that is being exchanged. But there's another situation that people just impose their help because you do not accept it, and then there is gratitude. I've had that situation. I'm not very good at cleaning my house and those kind of things, especially as a single father. And for me, kind of living in a mess was not that much of a problem. But when a woman came in, and that was a problem. And sometimes they just said, John Paul, just piss off, go for a walk or anything, but don't come up with your arguments or whatever. I just clean up. Whatever you say, I'm cleaning up. And that is the type of thing that sometimes is there, to get help. And that's it. It's just an imposition, a very valuable imposition.
You can see how I clean my house.
You need a woman, man.
I need somebody to straighten up and not be upset with me for leaving such clutter all the time.
So I want to bring up something that John Paul just said. I'm not talking about this specific instance. I'm just using it as an example. That person that wanted to clean up your house, maybe they're not really helping you. They're helping themselves because they want to be comfortable. So that's the other thing. A lot of times people will, and maybe they're even fooling themselves into thinking they're helping someone, but they're really doing what's more comfortable for them. And again, that goes back to awareness, self-awareness.
Yeah, case in point, evangelism.
Yeah,
Evangelists firmly believe, I believe, that they're trying to help.
yep.
And that if I accept their God, then I will be saved.
That's funny because when I used to have, Jehovah's Witnesses knock on my door, I would open the door and I would, I would open the door and I would listen and I'd be like, I have already found God. So thank you so much. I'm good. And that was it. And then they left.
All right. God, yes, quite interesting.
So this notion of mutual understanding and discussing what help one could ask for and could receive, I wanted to get back to this notion of grokking, which is introduced by Robert Heinlein. And I understand grokking in a level of gradations, okay? And I wrote up this thing back in 2018, okay? First level of indifference, which is, I hear you, and this is my response. Second is cordial listening. Let me paraphrase what I heard, so I believe that you believe that I understand. Third level is elementary grokking, which is with judgment, okay? I see and know you through my values, my framework, my priorities. Next one is partial grokking. I see and I know you through your values, your framework, your priorities. Then I call the fifth level deeper grokking, which is, I am curious about you and me through an emergence and unification of our combined values, frameworks, and priorities. I just wanted to put that into the record.
I'd love to be able to implement that. Stacy knows of a correspondent of mine who's very cordial, but he's off in astrology and sort of departing from what I consider science. And I don't want to, separate from him, but I also don't believe anything he says because it's just, it's narrative kind of from astrology. And I would love to figure out, Sam, how to engage with him in a constructive level where he and I get on the same page and don't just pretend to entertain each other. Go ahead, Stacy.
I was going to say the pretending is working because I think you're doing the right thing, because what I see you doing is he presents something that has an astrological basis and you present something that has a literary one, but it's coincides. So you're adding a different viewpoint of really the same thing. And I think that is constructive because
okay.
Because it doesn't contradict what's in the literature.
Yeah. It's a little bit frustrating because I feel like the dialogue is endless and the rate of growth of it is infinitesimal, but maybe I'm just expecting a lot more out of it than's coming.
Yeah, and if it's not enjoyable, you shouldn't do it.
It's not off-putting, it's just I don't have any sense of significant progress. Getting to the same page. It's like I'm reading a book from the front, he's reading the book from the back, and we're nowhere near the middle.
But that's the thing. There's a whole world out there that are seeing both sides and they'll be able to put it together in a way that works for them.
Yeah. Anyway, it just reveals or illustrates the issue that Sam's describing of how to get to a level of grokking that's reasonably satisfying. That's not disrespectful, but also not just empty. It's the amount of emptiness that disturbs me.
And to truly delve into that, we should all be sharing water. And
What
those
was
of
the
you
name?
who've
What was the
been-
name you said? Kukui?
What?
Did you say you said
He said
somebody's name?
Kukui.
Kukui?
Too truly.
Oh, too truly.
Yeah, to
I thought,
truly
okay.
delve into this. And
Oh,
that's a
too
reference.
truly. Okay.
It's a
Sorry.
it's a reference to the practice in the book that introduced this notion of grati.
Yeah.
It's a Martian practice of sharing water as one of the most holy things we can do together.
Yeah, and it sort of flows out of your hands because you have holes in your hand. Here, have some water. Oops, I lost it. Yeah.
On the 22nd of February, which is a beautiful date, 2/2/2/2/2/2. And that's why I chose that particular date, because I just loved it. And 2 is also one of those elements of balance and everything, if you go into numerology and those kinds of things. And we have our next peace online session, which is going to be about inner peace. And I think it will be interesting because I have a couple of people there, like Susie Ravindra, a good friend of mine. We did a spiritual walk in Italy last summer. We went on a hike through the mountains to Assisi, St. Francis walk. And we were pilgrims. And during the walk, we did all kind of exercises like group sessions and talking sticks and all these kind of things. It was an absolutely beautiful adventure. But he has his life totally geared up around donations and everything. So he does really great work also with the United Nations and everything. But he's very spiritual, and he's from India, but he used to live in Vancouver, but then ended up in Italy because he married a woman, an Italian woman, who's doing exactly the same thing as his, but then not from a masculine energy point of view, but feminine energy point of view. So it's beautiful. So I invited him. I didn't invite him. He said, well, I would like to do something on inner peace. So I would let him to do that. And I have somebody else she's from Belgium, Lieve Wilms. And she's created 33 cards, which are, I have them here. These, it's called the relationship tool in 33, the Universal Relationship Esperanto. And it talks about the complexity that we are living in right now, the duality where we come from, like the right and wrong and hierarchy, the top and bottom and those kind of things, into all kinds of different type of things. And how do we deal with this? And I asked her to do things with us too on that particular date. So welcome to have a look at it. And if this group has something to add to that, and obviously I'd be very pleased to see if we could have some more also about the inner peace reflection. And
I'd love an invite to that if you could put a link. I'd be interested in going.
All right, well, it's fine. You're welcome, obviously. Thijs just wanted to say something about this.
Yes, the times, because you have the Dutch session on 9 o'clock Dutch or 10 o'clock in the morning, and you have the English session or Spanish on another time. So what's the time?
This particular session starts at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, our time, which means exactly the time that this particular session started today. So that will be, so it's, I don't know, it's 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock Sam's time, I think.
8 o'clock Sam's time, 11 o'clock. No, yes, 11 o'clock Eastern time.
11 o'clock Eastern time. So it might be kind of feasible for you guys to participate. But anyway, and then in March, we will have Andras Laszlo. I don't know if you remember, if you know Andras. He used to be the director together with Irvin Laszlo of the Club of Budapest. Irvin was the founder, Irvin Laszlo, and Andras was general manager. So he was relating to the Dalai Lama and to all these people and everything, you know, Gorbachev and whatever. So they set up all kinds of things. And you're still very much also in this community related to the son, Alexander. whom I met 10 years ago in the house of his father when he was married still with Katja and everything. So, Andras Lazaro proposed to me to do inner peace through music. So in March, we will be doing inner peace through music. And I'm very, his father was a very good violin player, and he himself is a pretty good violin player himself. So I wonder what he's coming up with. But he's also a Sufi master. So it will be interesting to see what he comes up with. Anyway, I leave the platform to that because I would like to pay attention to the peace so that we can develop peace together and create communities that are developing peace also in our surroundings, like we've been doing here together. We've been looking at our own perception of peace and how to interact with each other and see about peace. So that's an absolutely beautiful experience. Very welcome to do so, to participate. And if you have ideas in the coming months that you would like to express during one of these sessions or something, feel free to suggest it, because I'd be more than willing to give you space for that. Sam.
I'm very interested in your connections with the Laszlos, so I will make a point of attending the March event, okay? Possibly even the February event. The thing that I wanted to say in some form of explanation for my bluntness and possibly my distastefulness, perhaps, is that the tolerant middle enables evil. And I want the tolerant middle to be aware that they're enabling evil. So all of this openness towards bad thinking, bad science, bad values is the reason I call it out. Because without being called out, the people on the sidelines allow evil to take over. It's a big concern of mine. I think it's identified as early as Elie Wiesel. And I would like for us, particularly those of us that spend a lot of time on these topics, to not be enabling evil. So we have to be willing to buck this political correctness of always be tolerant, always be listening, always be, respectful of other people's opinions. No, there are some that should not be respected, should not be tolerated. And I feel strongly about that.
Mm-hmm.
Over. Stacey.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that maybe, like for me at least, there are some people that maybe I won't tolerate, but not opinions that I won't tolerate. I'm not going to waste my time with people, whether I agree with them or don't agree with them, that aren't reasonable kind of people and open to conversation, regardless of their opinions.
I agree with Sam that dealing with bad science, including people who have credentials in science and are departing from the protocols of the scientific method in subtle but substantial ways, that has been a long-running battle in my life. Cold fusion was a big example that ran for several years, and I never really solved it. I mean, I could identify what I thought was the departure from the protocols of the scientific method, but I couldn't successfully communicate to the other party, the diehard believers, for example, in cold fusion, why that was such a problem, why it led them to an incorrect scientific belief. I never really solved that problem, but I ended up writing a lot of blogs about it, including some very funny ones.
I want to say one more thing. Many people see a parallel to what's going on now in our world to what happened before the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Many people. And I'm here to tell you that I get that from people on both sides. They just see it for different reasons. So they actually agree, but they're coming from different places, which causes them to think they're in opposition to each other. And that's what I'm concerned about. And those are the middle people that it's worth it to take time and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, don't misunderstand me. Those people who are still engaged, who are still trying, who are still willing to expand their perspective, those are not the people I'm calling stupid. Do not misunderstand that.
Right, but what happens is when we use a term like stupid, it paints a broad brush.
No, it doesn't.
Over a
It's
whole-
very
it does.
specific in my mind. It's very specific.
But so this is where I'm gonna call you out. That's in your mind, because if you were to say,
And I've defined it.
so is every Trump supporter stupid?
Most of them, yes.
Is every anti-vaxxer stupid?
No.
Okay, well, that's good.
No.
It's a dangerous word to use because
It is. It is.
It is.
I'm using it precisely to get people to think about this.
you saw the story, was it yesterday, where Biden called the, was it Fox News, called him a moron off mic? He didn't realize he was on mic.
Yeah. Juicy.
Ducey, yeah.
Yes, with all the data around Trump, for one to still be a Trump supporter, I'm very, very willing to engage with someone who is that way, but I'm going to have some very specific questions. Now, on the other hand, with vaccines, there's a lot of things that are still unknown about vaccines.
There is a phenomenon, and Sam alluded to it, and probably the best example of this phenomenon is Jordan Peterson, who's very articulate. He has a very good vocabulary. He can put a sentence together where the sentence is diagrammable, and at the end of a paragraph, you haven't learned anything. It's empty rhetoric. He is gifted at empty rhetoric. But it sounds very, very erudite.
And he speaks with authority.
Yeah. And then if you say, well, what did you learn? I say, I learned how to speak in very profound ways where I actually haven't said a damn thing. So I'm not gonna imitate that practice. And you see, I mean, you see a lot in politicians, but you also see it in academics, who can answer very profoundly, except that didn't really answer it. I don't know how to deal with that. I mean, you nod politely as you're listening, and then at the end of the day, you haven't acquired any insight.
What happens if you say that?
I did say it in the P2P forum on Facebook. Somebody brought up the question of Jordan Peterson a few years ago, and I pointed out it's like going to Oakland. There's no there, and I didn't get any pushback. It just sort of left it sitting that, yeah, he sounds like he knows what he's talking about, except that there's no real content, no meat. So,
I
but
don't know. I listened to his interview with that woman who was supposedly attacking him. I thought he was fairly articulate in that interview.
he's articulate. No question about it, he's articulate.
I understood him.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you lay out a jigsaw puzzle, it's disassembled on the table, and you turn all the pieces over and you pick up a piece and say, well, this piece belongs to this picture, and you mention it. And then you put it back down and you pick up another piece and say, this also is a part of the picture. And you review all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle one by one, but you never assemble them. You never show how they're related in the ensemble. So at the end of the day, you say, well, I already knew that every piece of the jigsaw puzzle belongs, but I still don't know how to connect it all into one big integrated whole. That was the part I wanted to learn. It's missing.
When you first, when you first see somebody pick up that puzzle and they say, this is a piece of the puzzle, that's where you can jump in and say, does it belong on the right or on the left? Does it
What does
belong on the
what does it
top?
connect
or on
to?
the-
Yeah, he never shows you how the pieces connect in a building model, and you don't realize that until he's revealed 36 pieces and never explained how they all interconnect. And you go, at the end of the day, you say, I haven't really learned anything. Yes, I appreciate that all those pieces belong. Okay, now what? You know, end of lecture. Like, I mean, politicians can do that too. They can tell you all the factors that are relevant to making a political decision or a policy decision, but they don't put all the pieces together to say, and this is why this policy makes sense. They just mention, and what'll happen is one side will highlight the elements that they care about and ignore the elements, you know, that militate against it. And so they'll cherry pick the elements that they want to talk about and not show how to put it all together to get a sensible policy where everything makes sense as an ensemble.
Yeah. Alex, welcome.
Hi, is my audio working?
It's too
Yeah.
loud.
Yeah,
Too late.
it's clipped.
Okay. I was going
It's
to say
understandable, but it's clipped.
the politicians can talk for 25 minutes on an issue, and sometimes they really just were talking. They didn't point anything out specifically about the issue, just ranting.
Yeah.
And other times they can be very articulate and specific, and people listening pick up on that. It's only reasonable to prick your ears up when you hear somebody talking eloquently and intelligently about the issue. But the thing is, they often use that term, and because of this, we do this, and that's why we do this. You know what I mean? You often hear that in politicians, excellent politicians. I've heard one saying, and the economic pressures were growing in this sector, which required a response, and the lobbyists were pressuring from the other side, which required a response, and so we did this. And so we introduced this policy or whatever. Or so we decreased taxes for the corporations, or we increased taxes for the fossil fuel industry. But you don't often hear that.
Yeah.
I wish you did. You know, we all know we need these things to happen at the higher levels of politics. They're not happening because the pressure is coming from the wrong sources.
Right.
We need people to unite. If people united together, who knows what could happen? And bringing all a group that will bring together all these other groups, because there's hundreds of groups doing things for the planet. And it's like, you know, Jean Paul is here, so I'll respect his presence. He's got excellent credentials and wonderful ideas. And Stacey's here, who loves research. And Thies is keen on finding out, digging into stuff and finding links. So we can bring that stuff together. Joshua Bridge, look at that. What could go wrong? We've got Sam at the helm and Barry Coit working on the problem too. Over.
Oh. It's interesting what you say about politicians. And last Monday, I was called by an alderman here of one of our municipalities, and he was enthusiastic about a way of working. And he was calling my help because of the energy transition, because he was trying to get the citizens together. But if you do that as an alderman, as a politician, then it is a political issue. But if I do it, it's a citizen's issue. So he's calling me to make it a movement where he can create a political statement. Because if he does a political statement, then he gets burned off in his political party. He will probably even be fired or something. So working together with complex things that are not politically viable because you don't have the underlying forces of the people, because most of the people are not willing to go through the transition and everything of that is complex, but does affect everybody. Then you do need to have people who can take that leadership stand of change, which is not accepted yet or adopted yet or understood yet by the masses. So I'm working very much with people together in political environments. The only risk I've had in the past when I started working was air quality. For instance, that once there is a consensus in the community, then the politicians tend to take over and drop me like a brick stone. But that is one of the consequences. Then I work with different municipalities and I managed to get things going. And I know that after a few months or years or something, they come back with me because they can't do it by themselves. But anyway, that's a different type of story. The thing is that for complex issues, we need to take the stand ourselves here and not depend on the politicians because they won't do it.
Politicians are our own worst enemy.
Unfortunately, they're also our worst enemy.
Yes. Yeah.
Hey, it's getting close to the top of the hour. I mentioned I'm going to go have a brunch with my youngest daughter today. So just wanted to see if people wanted to invite some checkouts, and or I will let this continue and appoint probably Barry again host, because Barry's usually quite regular in staying till the end.
Well, Barry will have to shovel some snow away from his front door, I think. And
I live in a condo. We have a crew that does that, and we pay a bloody lot of money, $630 a month for maintaining the condo. It's a lot of money. It includes plowing and shoveling and cutting the grass.
And Sam, you have a whole day in front of you, and we are finishing our day. We will have dinner and then we go to bed. So it's quite interesting to see that there are those differences also. It's beautiful.
Actually, we haven't
Alex,
heard from Kayla at all today. Kayla, any thoughts from what you've heard today?
No, this morning I had trouble listening because there was something wrong with my internet connection. But I got most of it. It was a really nice conversation. The only thing I wanted to add, I actually put it in the chat when Barry said make good art. It just reminded me of one of my friends. He hosts this dance online, and he likes to call it Make Any Kind. And as a technical instructor, you know, I had to learn what he was talking about. So it's a Hawaiian phrase, and it's just, you know, his perspective is if you want to dance, you just dance. We don't worry about technicality. You follow, you do your best, and you make any kind. So anyway, I was just listening to you guys, and I'm about to get off because I'm going to see Tyra. Maxwell are going to Studio City where she's at, and we're going to have lunch with her and just talk story, and it's going to be lots of fun.
All right.
Enjoy.
Pass on a hug from me to Tyra.
For sure.
Okay, cool. Alex, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I'll be checking out early because this computer I'm using, it's only got a Celeron processor. It's very slow, and it's a Lenovo from a company that used to make IBM computers.
Yep.
And it's very security intensive. It tries to block Zoom when it tries to access my hard drive files for the backgrounds because of the malware, Microsoft Office and malware incorporated inside. It doesn't like, it has to get permissions and that, and I think I've got the settings too high. Anyway, the computer's very slow, and I've got a lot of work to do with downloading BIOS updates to put on the USB stick to put on the new machine, because that crashed yesterday on Zoom. You know, I was on Zoom trying to log in with my free account, and I was already logged in with my paid account, and the thing crashed. My computer wouldn't start. Before it crashed, I was getting lines on the screen. It looked like the Matrix download, and everything went blank. The machine turned off, and I couldn't restart it. So that was a bit spooky. Thank you, Zoom. Over.
I'll check out. And I just want to share with Jean-Paul, you know, I'm interested in the March call as well, because I do a lot of work with music and healing, and I have my own practice which incorporates journaling with music and movement, and that's for wellness, and I use it a lot. interested in
Beautiful.
that. So,
And if you have something to you share with the people, then obviously I can give you space for that. Because if that's your type of speciality, then why don't you just also show some of that?
let me think about it because I have to record it because, you know, it's a bit of a performance and I'm still getting over my hurdles on sharing it that way.
Think about it if you feel confident, and then obviously the invitation is there.
Okay,
All right.
what I might do is record something and share it so that if people want to click on it, they can, and if they don't have to.
Mhm.
I'll do it that way.
And maybe March is that it will be the 20th of March, which is the equinox. And maybe you can do something also from the planetary point of view, or the beginning of springtime, which is a kind of a growing period for the people too. The warmth and the light is coming. So there's also some spiritual things that can be dealt with. So anyway.
The whole thing is about self-growth. So it is self-growth through journaling, music, and movement.
Right.
Have you got some background music to play while you put on the show?
No, but I will think about that.
As you do that, it'll be beautiful.